Welcome to Discovering Creativity. Once more, we are here together to have an interview with Shane Sasno, if I pronounced it well.
You're good.
And Chelsea and Graham, which she's doing a master's in creativity in educational psychology. And this program is an idea of Claudia and that we had together from Instituto San Miguelense of Mexico, Texas A&M University, and also the American Creativity Association. So we are using all these three institutions to share the information with other people. Having said that, welcome, and we are going to get started. Now, the way this is going to work is I'm going to ask Chelsea to ask the questions, and then we will all have a conversation, but I will also ask questions now and then. All right?
All right. Sounds good. I'd like to start off with Shane. Can you let us know about the type of work you are currently doing?
I can. As soon as I raise my desk up, because part of my work is that I work from home. I'm doing all remote work, and I have been doing remote work since COVID, which has definitely shifted the way that I engage with teams around creativity. So current work, the contract that I'm on right now. So I have I'm going to get technical on you. So I have an LLC. That LLC is contracted with a company called ITC, which is a technology company that puts people in companies to work. And the company that I'm working inside of contract from ITC called Highline Warren, and they sell automotive chemicals and parts. Inside there, I was hired as a change manager, but I very quickly became a project manager with change management as a side. Initially standing up a piece of software, and then that piece of software needed to get rolled out to the sales team, and that then became the change management side of things. And now I'm rolling off that project after a year and starting to do work to stand up the customer master data management, and I'll be project program and change management on that. And I'm currently functioning as a BRM, a business relationship manager. So that means I'm at the very fuzzy front end, and I'm hoping that I have some opportunity to use some of the more creative thinking or problem solving skills that I have accumulated over the years. So that's where I'm at right now. You're on mute.
Mute.
That echo, which I caught.
What did you go to school for?
Which time? Sorry.
Well, I guess what led you to your creativity path?
Okay, so I went back to school in 2001. I thought I was going to get an just an associate's degree in visual media and audio, digital audio. And so I got that degree as an associate's degree. And then I was a year away from getting an associate's that would let me transfer straight into the University of Washington. And so I just finished up those transfer degrees, and I was able to transfer straight into the University of Washington in Seattle, where I actually designed my own degree. So I designed a degree that was the study of creative processes through compositional techniques. And I used psychology and philosophy as the lenses in which I looked at those compositional techniques. And when I say compositional techniques, that means art, music, writing, whatever kind of creative stuff. But those are my primary focuses: art, music, and writing. So I got that as a BA. I still can't believe they let me do that, but they did let me do that. And then I thought, okay, I need to study that. I need to continue studying creativity, but I need something that's more firm than a bachelor's of arts that I made up in creativity. And so I found that at Buffalo State, the applied creativity program, so creativity, problem solving, and change leadership. And so I got my master's of science there in 2008. And then I went to Portland right as the economy collapsed. And education since then, I got an MBA as well on top of that just a couple of years ago. So that's the background. What led me to creativity, the key piece of that question is, as I was going into the University of Washington, thinking about the BA and what to study, I listed everything I was interested in, and I figured out that the one thing that was a consistent thread throughout all of them was the concept of creativity. And so I just started using that as my focal point.
That's impressive. Very impressive.
I don't tell that story to anybody anymore because, it's long, and I'm not anymore.
But it started with kind of audiovisual. Creativity was, kind of the seed for everything, which is awesome.
I was a musician for 20 years first. If that helped.
Oh.
Guitar?
Yeah, you think?
I happen to see those in the background.
There's that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So another question regarding personal creativity. Can you tell us more about your change experiments? What are the key benefits you get from them?
So that's an interesting question. And you ask my personal creativity versus my change experiments. So that
Well,
I really like
yes.
two words. Those are really strong words in my world, but how that question frames is a little, it's difficult for me to pinpoint what you mean. It's change experiments versus how I use creativity in my personal world. Do you mean in my professional world or in my personal life?
I can explain that. It's just I saw your website and you had like 3 or 4 change experiments. So you tried things going in the train, but we're trying things out to help your wife, for instance, with marketing of clothes design.
Okay, so I think I can frame that in a way. So how do I use my creativity to change experiments? So the way that I would frame that, if I understand where you're going, is how am I personally evolving? And I use creativity to try to personally evolve. And how does that play out? Well, let's take an example instead of just talking at it theoretically, as you said. So an example would be in the time that I've been married to my wife, which is 14 years now, we have been trying for a long time to find a business where we could function together, where we could start a business together. And this has been very difficult. She was a fashion designer, and then she had her own fashion design program, and that's a very difficult market. So she pulled away from that. And during that time, while she was doing that, I was always trying to find ways to be helpful in that business. So using creativity and creative processes there to understand how to do a little bit better marketing, do more interesting advertisements and things like that, and facilitating conversations just with her and her team to try to solve the complex problems that they might come up with. In terms of evolving as we've moved along, I think the thing that is probably the most useful from a creativity perspective is the mindset, and this is partially growth mindset, but it's really the mindset of if you're not thinking of it as a creative act and being willing to try and fail, it's too hard to try to just always think you're going to be successful. You have to have that mindset of, okay, I know that this is a creative thing. I'm creating another business and it has the potential to fail and I'm going to try, but I have to be willing to fail. And so let's try another example here. Right as COVID hit, I was working at Nike as a change manager, but I really wanted to start up my business because I ran a business from 2018 to 2015 doing strategic planning, creative problem solving, innovation workshops. I was a single shingle consultant that facilitated and trained people in those various areas. And I wanted to start up a strategy business so I could facilitate a lot of strategic planning work. And I went into it with that open, creative mindset of, okay, I'm going to try to do this. And I started creating it, right? I put together an LLC, started creating the network, started creating the marketing, put together a website, all those little creative pieces that I was doing along the way, building out the framework and foundations for that business, which is joyful for me. I like that part of it. I like starting the business. And as I was going and I was talking to people and talking about the potential for work, I actually started realizing not only the fact that COVID was going to be a real problem, obviously, but also that, and I'm going to get a little cultural here on you. I was trying initially to do strategic planning specifically for nonprofits. And through a number of conversations I had, I found out that as a white guy in that environment where I was at a considerable disadvantage to actually getting contracts and work. So I found more information and it put a serious block on my path forward to being able to actually make it a fiscally sound business. And so I closed it down. I couldn't move it forward because it didn't make any sense, especially coming out of COVID. And it was hard enough to get work. And then I was competing in an environment where I was disadvantaged. And so it didn't make sense anymore. Does all that begin to answer your question?
Yeah. Yes, I think that it does. At the end of the day, it's this whole thing, which is creativity, trying things differently. You have to try, you have to do things. And it is not wrong. It is not wrong to learn from experience if it goes down, if it doesn't help him, if it failed. I had 2 businesses in Singapore, they failed. I learned something.
Yeah.
It shapes your character a little bit more. And then next time you're a bit more, you're wiser. So I think that a lot of people, when they start their own business, they have enthusiasm. Well, that's what I had. A lot of enthusiasm, but maybe not enough wisdom. And I had that problem with, I'm trying to offer something to a market that may not be ready for it, or I don't have some other things. In any case, yes, it answered the question because you have been doing some things in different areas. I thought that those were very good examples of how you can use creativity on your spare time, on your way to work, and then try things out. Now you did something. You did something with whiskey. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that's on the way to work. So you really dug into the LinkedIn account there. Okay,
Yeah.
so that one, this takes a little bit of a story. 2015, I actually got my first big boy job working for a consultancy. So I had been self-employed from 2007 to 2015. Every year I would do my own strategic planning just for my business. And one of the components that came out of my 2013, 2014 strategic planning was a wild card. And when I do strategic planning, I'm using a traditional sort of strategic planning model, but I always mix in fun, creative problem-solving processes and creativity tools just to make it more interesting and productive. But the wild card for me was in the strategic planning. If I see an opportunity that would actually take me away from my business, that I should look at it and explore it. And just on a whim, on a lark at the end of 2014, I applied for a consulting job in a company called Acme Business Consulting, and I got the job, surprisingly. And so I shut down my business and I started that. What that relates to the whiskey business. My first job and multiple jobs after that came out of having that job in the consultancy, which ended after 7 months because they lost their Nike contract. But what I got out of that was I was always commuting back and forth to Nike, which on the train is 3 hours a day. It's an hour and a half there and it was an hour and a half back. And so I had time to kill and I was just trying to figure out a way out of it. And I wanted to explore all of what it meant to have an online business and do drop shipping and do product creation and do inventory and all those things. And so I got a little portable computer and I would hooked up to my hotspot, and on the way out and on the way back on the train, I would sit there and I would create the website and create all the systems and all the tracking. So I used the time that I had to explore and learn something new. The thing that killed that business was, as I started selling product, I realized that if you have a 40-hour job and you're commuting 15 hours a week, that it only leaves the weekend in which you can actually move and mail and ship your inventory. And it was just me. And I had 2 babies at home that I was already missing enough. And so it's like, this doesn't make any sense for 2 reasons. One, the time that it takes away from my personal life and these things that I'm doing all the work for in the first place. And 2, the volume at which I would have had to sell at the margins that were there was so high that I would end up working in 2 40+ hours a week jobs and never seeing my family. So I learned in that creative process and getting as far down the road as I could that didn't fit my personal criteria for having a healthy life. And so I shut that one down. I really liked that one. That was a very fun one, because my favorite part of all these is always the branding piece, developing the logo and putting together the website and all of the copy and defining who you are as a business. That stuff's really fun, because that's really where all the creative tools are easiest to use.
Yeah. So the principle that I get from your story is that if you can identify that how many people take the train and they waste their time, and if you can identify the times where, because of transportation or whatever, you can do something productive, that can open up space for something creative. Something creative, if it allows you to do that. If you're not driving, don't try to use the computer.
But I can top that one too. Always trying to figure that out, right? There's got to be some way I could use my time and create. So eventually I got sick of taking the train. So after 4 years, I had made enough money, because we were almost broke in 2015 when that job shut down, the first consulting one. After 4 years, I bought a car and I started doing the commute. So that reduced my commute down to somewhere between 40 minutes and an hour and a half in the afternoon. And so on my phone, I got an app that would just record me talking and transcribe. And I started making up stories. And so I just would tell the stories. And I haven't really done anything with those beyond, I took one story and I broke it down into each line or potential frame for a kid's book. And I actually hired somebody off of Fiverr.com, an artist, to draw the frames, or draw the images that had the description that I did for each frame. So even then, even when I was driving, I was actually able to produce something creative in that time and space. And that didn't go anywhere. I mean, I never followed up on publishing it, but I had fun and I was able to do something valuable there with that time. And I still have a whole catalog of emails of stories that I told driving back and forth to Nike. So,
yeah, well, you kept your mind a lot active. You continue to make connections. So great. You never know what creative efforts, in what ways it could have helped you afterwards to be maybe a little bit more alert than other people at work, a little bit more making other connections at work, and in a different type of state. In any case, if you enjoyed it, only for the enjoyment, I think it's also value. There's some value there. So
yeah, so there's a combination of things there too. It's enjoyment, certainly. I enjoy the creative process, but you have to understand that there's also an intrinsic motivation involved in all of that. And the intrinsic motivation is that I'm not actually a huge fan of corporate work, though I work in corporate and I get paid well to do so. And apparently I'm good at it because I keep getting the jobs. Nobody's firing me and they keep putting me on new projects. And so I must be doing something right. But that was never the intention. I always just wanted to be an independent, creative person. But then I had a family, life comes in, house, family, they're the top priority. Got to take care of them. Right. So the thing about almost all of those creative endeavors was always looking for some creative way to make some more money or something on the side. It turns out it's really hard to do all those things at the same time that you're full-time employed. So at least I enjoyed it, though. That's the positive. There's always that intrinsic value of the creating, with the understanding that maybe it'll turn into something more. Probably won't. Statistically, it's very difficult to do anything, music, writing, art, online websites, and actually become successful or generate more income than I'm making with a corporate job. So, I mean, this is just the reality that I've experienced. I know that others have pushed through and done great, but I just keep trying.
The minority that gets published and goes in the news and all that's one thing. But a lot of people like you and me, we try different things. A lot of things do not work.
Yep. So we better enjoy it, otherwise we feel like wasted time. So I have enjoyed all those. I wish some of them would have worked out better, but the end result of all of these trying things is actually I did finally find a job that my wife and I have together as a business. So I have a full-time job, corporate. However, on the side now, we actually moved to Pittsburgh because part of the reason we moved to Pittsburgh is because in Pittsburgh, we found the common ground that we had always shared, which we love houses. We love to walk around in neighborhoods and see old houses. And here there's all these beautiful neighborhoods and these beautiful houses, but they're affordable. So not only can we get into our own house, but we're now buying houses and not flipping them, but restoring them, which is a creative process, and then renting them out. And so that we found a business together that engages the creative process of restoration and improving something, which is very joyful, and fixing things. And we're constantly problem solving. That constant negotiation back and forth of identifying the problem, understanding the problem, brainstorming back and forth, and the give and take that it takes between us to make sure that we are willing to look at possible solutions, not get stuck on those solutions until we come to an actual agreement, and then move forward from there. And always in a partnership of the back and forth and, okay, here's what I think I should do here. Here's my idea for how to fix this. And what do you think? And she'll say something, and we either end up with one of our ideas or we often end up with a combination of our ideas. And that is, I directly attribute that obviously to the fact that I have a good relationship, but also to the fact that those processes are ingrained in the way that I think personally. So I'm always thinking in that sequence, right? Clarify that problem, gather the data, clarify the problem, ideate on things together, and then implement on a solution. It's always there. And so
combine different solutions, ideas into a solution. It's a combination. Yeah.
So it's both intellectual and it ends up with a real world outcome of fixing or improving whatever it is that we're working on.
Thank you. You have one more question, Chelsea?
Oh, yeah. How can companies benefit in the long term from training in creative thinking?
I would expand on that a little bit, actually. I don't know if you know this book, Creative Leadership, Gerard Poupon. So this is one of my favorite books for one particular reason. How can companies benefit from creative thinking? I would have to expand it out of creative thinking, because creative thinking is one component of a larger system, right? There's all of the other aspects of gathering the data and understanding the problem. And there's creativity involved in all of that. The brainstorming of gathering the data, the brainstorming of trying to look at the problem in all the different ways until you really understand it. And that's creative thinking. But the thing about this book that really got me, and I wish I could do more of now because I'm working from remote, it's the facilitation of the mental and emotional space in which you get the right kind of thinking and output from your team. That is the thing that's the most useful. You got to move beyond, hey, here's a process and I'm going to run you through a tool. Anybody can run somebody through a tool. And it becomes very difficult to do when you're dealing with C-suite people at an executive level. They all think they know everything and they already think they know the answers and they just want to push through. And so trying to pull them in different directions to actually work through a process can be very difficult. But it does actually become a little bit easier if I'm thinking of and considering the emotional content, how I want them to be feeling at the moment of that particular problem stage. And so let's give you an example. There's this thing that I worked through a long time ago. It was a Energizer exercise. This is 2015, working at Nike, just kicking into a really large project with a whole lot of stakeholders. And I used a creative thinking, or just a creative tool, just a fun thing to kind of begin to set the emotional state for this team. And what I did is I took a large ball of yarn. It was about this big. By the time I wound it all together, I had to do a bunch of balls of yarn and wind them all together so that it was big enough to throw across a room. And we had 25 people in a big circle. And my goal was to help them see and feel the connection to everybody, and then to bring it all back to the point of the work in the first place and what it meant to be connected and how we were connected. And so I had everybody stand in the circle and they would throw the ball across to somebody who hadn't had it yet. So then you're holding on the thread, you throw it, that person holds on the thread, and it goes back and forth, right? It creates this giant web of thread. And so we're all showing and feeling, okay, well, this is kind of fun connection thing. And it's just fun to throw the thing around. And then at the end of it, I say, okay, so now, before you move, think about the person who is, in your mind, the most central point of all of this work, the most important key person in this work. And then take your thread and go and give it to that person. And almost everybody walked to the same person and gave them that thread. And there was this really opening moment of like, oh my God, not only are we all connected to this one person, but that person's going to get destroyed because they're at the center of every one of these 25 people's work. And so we set the emotional state of some openness and some connectedness. And then we brought it to a point of this is just made the challenge of this real work very visible from a bottleneck perspective. So did that answer the question?
No, it really did, actually. Yeah. I can see where that would, because it's a lot of things are more tangible when you can see it. So creating that, or having the ability to be creative and think of something like that to help people see it. I mean, I can definitely see the eye-opening experience that helped create.
That was a cool one. Unfortunately, that was also 9 years ago. And in the last 4 years being remote, it's very difficult to conduct those sort of physical space presence energy exercises. But bringing it back to this, I'll just tie this in because I've been thinking a lot about this lately. And I just love that it defines it's this 6-step creative problem solving process. It's a little more complex, but at each stage, it defines what the cognitive space is supposed to be for problem solving, and then what the emotional space should be that ties to it. So if you can get people to that emotional space, it makes the work more effective.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For instance, if you want to get information or data, I mean, they have to be curious about the whole thing. They have to wonder. I wonder what we need to know, and people start instead of being judgmental, they start asking questions about the things they want to discover, and there's a certain level of excitement about the curiosity of finding things out. That's one of the possibilities.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll stop looking at that.
So I have this question about because we have about 10 minutes, and I wanted to ask a couple of things, if possible. What are the greatest obstacles you have found when facilitating change in a company?
Status quo, DNA of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
It's to put a fine point on it, it is change saturation or change overload. We live in a world now where, and a lot of this, I've been doing a lot of work in IT, and so many organizations that have so many programs and projects going on at the same time that everybody's overloaded with change. And the bigger the organization, the easier it becomes for someone to just duck and cover and wait for the change to blow over. Because a lot of the times, especially at a company like Nike, things are so big and there's so much going on that a lot of times the change will come through. And just give you a perfect example. I worked in analytics, so data analytics, and I was under a senior director, and they were trying to set up for HR a whole new structure for all of the data analytics professionals across the organization, across the entire enterprise, actually. So you'd have all these defined data roles, and then in each of those roles, you'd have the roles, the responsibilities at the different levels. So if I was a data analyst, I could look at the potential progression from beginning all the way up to the highest level, right? And then you have all these different roles. So we got all this structure set up, and then we're going to roll it out. Now, this was senior director. This was his pet project. Great project, really good thing. And we're rolling along, and we're getting it out there. And you run into just any number of levels of people who are like, well, I don't want to change. All right. There's always that going to be happening. And that's kind of standard just because it's human nature. But you can convince them and give them good reasons why this is beneficial. And certainly people on the ground who want to see not only they want to see how they can progress in their career, but they also want to see how they can move laterally. And all of this structure allowed people to move laterally and see where they would go. And so there was a lot of value in it. So we could get them on board. And so after you sort of overcome the resistance of, well, I don't like the new thing, or okay, I see there's value there. It's really hard. Do we have resources to do it? That's another one. Obviously, it's all the same stuff, right? Do we have the resources to do it? Yes, we've got a budget to put all this into place. Now we actually have to go out, do the roadshow, and tell everybody that this is happening or that it can happen, but we have to get you on board. So we're doing this roadshow. We're getting everybody on board. Communication at a global scale and getting all of these people to say, okay, we'll buy into this. And of course, there's a steering committee, and the steering committee all have to buy into it. So getting buy-in. Lots of resistance, but constantly moving it forward. Lots of ongoing conversations. And then the guy whose pet project it was, he gets a VP position in another org, and that's it. It's done. All of that work, that happens all the time inside of Nike. So that's part of it, is just that too many things going on. And if somebody jumps and goes and does something else, what they were working on will just disappear. The other side of it is right now, for example, there's 25 IT projects, and they're all happening at the same time. And at least 4 of them hit the sales team. Now, as an individual working on my little project, I don't necessarily see how many things are hitting that sales team, but the sales team is getting frustrated and annoyed that I'm trying to tell them and help them move forward and get training and make this change and how to use this new pricing software, while they're also getting hit from another direction about having to do a new sales process, and they've got a new leader, and they're losing these key people. Like, this just constant level of change that is burning people out. And so more than anything, if I could think about a way to help people be successful in change, excuse my language, but it'd be slow the fuck down. People have to slow down and prioritize the highest value projects. And that's really hard when you have a board of directors that's a venture capital firm on top of that board of directors overseeing the C-suite guys who are then overseeing all the work. And this venture capital firm is like, make money, go, go, go. Are you making progress? And the C-suite's like, are we making progress? Oh no, the numbers aren't coming in right, or we can't see them. And they just keep pushing down and pushing down and pushing down because they have targets they have to meet, which oftentimes are not realistic, because it feels like sometimes the C-suite and certainly the board of directors, they live in that ideal world. They talk about a place of creativity. That level, you get to just be like, oh, I got all these great ideas, and I'm just going to throw them down and say, go do this. And then everybody's scrambling to try to do it, when oftentimes the pain and the lack of success opportunity comes directly from too many things coming down. It's just there's not enough resource, there's not enough money, there's not enough time to actually implement really well on more than 2 or 3 things, but you got 20 things.
Yeah.
So it's oversaturation. That's really what crushes so many of these things from the get-go.
That makes
That's
sense.
the answer that I'm running into all the time. As a change manager, that is my life, living in that. And I have no influence, but sometimes right now, the organization I'm working with, they're getting pretty good. They're starting to really use the Kanban boards and stack all those projects and making those hard decisions, that microeconomic level decision to say, these are just not going to get funded right now. We're really trying to do that. But you've got mergers and acquisitions over the last 5 years, just a lot of stuff that wasn't done right. And so everybody has this lingering historical pain about all the change. So as you bring up more change, their historical trauma, if you will, impacts their ability and willingness to continue to engage. So again,
Yeah.
it's oversaturation in a change.
Yeah.
Use creativity to fix all that. Give the time and space to actually do it. Really.
Yeah. Well, this whole thing is the leadership, understanding people, how much they can take, what are the priorities, and how much you have to reduce in order to empower them to do things well.
Yeah.
Instead of just and also for them to be happy, which is another very important aspect. If you have employing a lot of people and 90% of the people are unhappy, maybe next year you don't have 20% of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
There's definitely some attrition that comes along with overabundant change.
Yeah. Thanks for detailed answer, which we don't get this type of answer very often, and also the concrete example.
Yeah, well, I've been getting beat up the last 15 years just so I could share all this with you. Corporate world,
it makes sense,
up, man. If you're a creative person, if you're a sensitive soul kind of person, and you live in the corporate world, and it can be rough. I've learned some lessons I didn't think I needed to learn or wanted to learn, and never would have chosen to learn. So, but you get better. So here we are.
Yeah. Is there any success story in terms of your when you were doing all this training and facilitation, change management? Is there any success story that you would like to share with us that you feel very proud of?
Some of my favorite stuff was in 2008 to 2015 when I was the single shingle space.
Mm-hmm.
One of the clients that I had was a government client, Beverly Stein. She worked in government for her whole life pretty much. And she was really into innovation. And so she hired me straight out of school, actually right out in 2008. It was my first gig. I was out networking around and handing out my creativity specialist card. And she took that card and she called me up and she said, I have this innovation workshop coming up. And she worked in government transformation. Her whole thing was post-bureaucratic governance transformation, right? So we were doing an innovation workshop, and I'll never forget, because coming straight out of school, she says, okay, come over and let's talk about it. And I show up at her house with a stack of books like this big. Look at all these books I have. Aren't they nice? They have interesting things. Anyway, so the point being is that we did 5 or 6 of those over the years. And the last big one that we did was around poverty and all the different communities and demographics that were impacted in poverty and how to move forward in helping alleviate poverty in the state of Oregon. And it was a big one. We ran 3-day workshops. We ran 5 simultaneous rooms. Some of my colleagues from school, Creative Problem Solving World, I brought them in to do some facilitation. I brought some other types of facilitators in. And I got to run the whole thing pretty much and from a facilitation perspective. So I designed the whole agenda. We had a plenary session at the beginning in which the governor actually showed up and talked to everybody, because this was funded by the state government. So it was funded by the state government, and our goal was to generate as many ideas, of course, as we could, to then funnel back to the government to then work with and try to implement. And at the end of the 3 days, I think we had about 50 reasonable ideas, with 3 to 5 that were really tight, good ideas that then my boss, the person who hired me into it, she took those ideas and wrote them all up and provided them back to the governor of the state of Oregon to implement. I don't know that those were ever actually implemented. I think portions of some of them were, because again, you take a great creative idea and you stick it into the government, where the DNA really is rough on creative ideas, and funding can be rough too. I don't know if those were ever implemented, but that workshop of 3 days and getting 50 people together who from across the country came to volunteer their time and their ideas and their expertise in that space, and successfully run it to come out the other end with a really good portfolio of ideas. That was great. That was absolutely one of my favorite jobs, and we did a really good job. Regardless of how implementation happened in a bureaucratic organization, we came up with some great stuff. And so, and a lot of it was even tailored to different demographics. I don't need to get into all the details of that, but that was my favorite one. That answer the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that facilitation is amazing when you get people to work together. It's not only that they come up with ideas, but I mean, the whole challenge of creativity is not so much to come up with 200 ideas, is how to come up with a criteria where you can assess the criteria and get the best.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're explaining the value of an idea or solution, someone will say, "That's amazing. I would have never thought of that." So there has to be something that is so attractive that people understand the value, but it just takes a lot of time, especially when you're thinking about complex problems and you are thinking about a lot of stakeholders. So that's why it's so challenging. But I completely agree with you. That's the type of workshops that is very, very, very meaningful. You also had it around a topic that it could be at the heart of a lot of people.
Yeah, there was that's why it was valuable, honestly. And again, though, even then, that is all that fuzzy front end. So you get some ideas, and then the implementation. How do you word it? How do you frame it so the value proposition makes sense? How do you put it into a business model or a governance model that will actually allow you to implement it as close to your original idea as possible? And even on the opposite side of that, how do you know when to pull the plug? Because sometimes on the innovation space, I had a job in my job right now. This chief commercial officer came up with this idea. He's like, "I like this." He was in an innovation workshop. He came back with this idea. He's like, "I've got this idea, and you're going to go do it." And so his idea was fundamentally flawed, because the way that he understood the system and the idea that he came up with were not in line. He wanted to do a particular approach to getting data to the sales reps, and the way he understood how the system gathered that data was incorrect. And so we couldn't actually implement what he wanted us to implement. So it went through a bunch of iterations, and we came up with a proxy version, like a version of it. So we did come up with something, but it wasn't what he came up with. And if he hadn't come up with it, if he wasn't stuck on doing something like that, we probably never would have done it, because its value proposition ended up going from really awesome in his mind to it's kind of a useful rule of thumb. It wasn't worth all the time and pain that it caused for us, because it ended up adding a month to our schedule, and it was rough. But that's what he wanted, so that's what.
So you have the power. You have the power. You can get people to work. So it's the politics. It's the politics of creativity, really.
So.
Well, I think that we have used all the time. Is there anything else that we didn't ask you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I don't know. I think the most useful skill that I have accumulated in all of this time is facilitation. Whether I'm facilitating creativity or anything else, it's that ability to work with people in a group to move forward, to solve problems. Because in the end, creativity is just a form of problem solving. It's all problem solving. It's always trying to create some new value, a new form of value, whether it's in an incremental space or a leapfrog over the moon kind of space. being able to move that group forward has been the most valuable thing for me. And even if it means just the group in my head, even if I'm doing it by myself and I'm just arguing with myself, still the process is very helpful. So
Yeah.
that's that.
Thank you. I agree
Yeah.
completely. Facilitation is such a wonderful tool, or at least the ability to be, and it's not easy to be a good facilitator, but if you have a good facilitator around, it's amazing the value you can get as for a team. Well, thank you so much for your help, Shane, and
You're welcome.
I'll send you the link as soon as I get it. And,
Where does all this go? What are you doing with all this information?
It's going to the Instituto San Miguelense. They have a page, a Facebook page. They have a Spotify channel. They have a YouTube channel, and eventually it will go to. But we are going to edit some parts.
Yeah, I would hope you'd edit that down. That's a lot of me. But this is like pull the valuable pieces out and post them up there.
And it will go through to our American
Nike, and they're all messed up. Don't keep that in.
American Creativity Association as well. But then we have a small group there. But if any, for sure, I will make sure that I will delete certain things. But for people to listen to all this, eventually it will be only for members.
Okay.
For the whole thing, for parts of it, it's going to be available to more people.
Yeah, well, if it helps somebody in their journey towards successful creativity and just engaging in the world in a brighter way, great. I hope that's.
I'm sure it will. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.